Welcome to the Startup Voyage podcast, where we feature in-depth conversations with industry leaders, tech visionaries, and seasoned investors who share valuable lessons, stories, and advice to inspire and empower upcoming entrepreneurs and innovators in the Web3 space. Now, if you've got friends or colleagues who are working or interested in this space, please share this podcast with them. We would really greatly appreciate your support. We work really hard to deliver the story behind the story, and these episodes can be accessible through YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. And so if you're actually a leader or influencer in this Web3 space, and then you have an inspiring story, some valuable insight, or key learnings that you'd like to share, send us an email to hello@thestartupvoyage.com and tell us why we should have you as a guest on our show. Thank you for joining, and let's kick off this episode. Do you want to know the best countries to start and build your Web3 or crypto business? Well, in this episode, we are joined with Markus Thielan, the author of Crypto Titans, in which he tells a story of how trillions were made and billions were lost in the cryptocurrency markets. Together, we're going to explore the most favorable and innovative jurisdictions across the globe that provide the ideal ecosystem for launching and growing your Web3 or crypto business today. Okay. Before we dive into the details, let's talk about why the jurisdiction you choose for your crypto business matters. From favorable regulations to supportive infrastructure, these jurisdictions offer a unique blend of opportunities that can propel your venture to new heights. So today we'll discuss the importance of selecting the right jurisdiction and how it can impact your success in the rapidly evolving world of decentralized technologies. In this episode, we'll go through several jurisdictions known for its crypto-friendly environment and also go through a few others that are less favorable. We'll explore the regulatory frameworks, tax incentives, funding opportunities, and infrastructure that make these locations stand out as an ideal home for crypto or Web3 innovations. So get ready for in-depth discussions and fascinating insights that will help you make informed decisions for your own crypto business. So welcome to the show, Markus. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
Very good. Thanks for having me. I'm, fired up.
You're all fired up, yeah. So first of it, I actually just wanted to talk to you first off to give the audience a little bit of background. I already introduced your background in general, but your journey in wanting to write your book, right? Crypto Titans, How Trillions Were Made and Billions Lost in Cryptocurrency Markets, which I found very interesting. And I've spent countless hours on these Twitter spaces, really listening to people around the world trying to unravel all these details and create these narratives, which was quite mind-blowing. So I was really happy to see that your book came out because it's more of capturing, and actually it's a lesson to the rest of the world and how it needs to pivot and change if we really want everything to go mainstream. So yeah, tell me about your journey and what really inspired you to get in and start writing this book, and how long did it take you?
Yeah, so it took around 6 months, and I had a lot of notes before. It sort of started initially almost exactly a year ago when I was at the FTX conference in the Bahamas, and of course met a lot of the players there and everything. The vibe was really big, and more crypto firms were actually moving to the Bahamas, right? It was because FTX moved there. There's also been some regulatory changes there that made it a lot easier, and I think it's kind of dawned on me. It's just you got the FTX moving from Hong Kong, which was seen as super crypto friendly initially, but of course they had some changes in how they're going to treat crypto exchanges, and then FTX moved to the Bahamas, and I was thinking, what, we have seen this actually from a lot of other firms, how they're moving around the world, and maybe there's a little pattern. While a lot of people always talk about the Bitcoin halving cycle as kind of the key driver for bull and bear markets, it's actually, I think, regulation has really a big impact, and I was thinking how regulation really impacts everything, from incentives, as you were saying earlier, to tax incentives, to everything. So it just really started from there and just putting it together.
Right, right. Okay. So I'm sure that in your research that you've done, I mean, things obviously have changed just in the last couple of months, right? In the
Yeah.
landscape globally. So I thought it'd be a good idea to just walk through either by jurisdiction and just talk about what we know and why it's advantageous, or maybe where to stay away from. Okay. So I guess let's go and start with like the top jurisdictions that you think that would be the most advantageous. What would your first pick be if you were a business, breaking into the space, crypto, Web3? Where would you look and research first, and how would you approach it?
Yeah, I think, one thing I've really like learned over, the last few years, and I used to run my own hedge fund, set up my own business, for example, in Hong Kong, because
Right.
I had a lot of, a big network there. There's a lot of capital, of course, in Hong Kong. These are all like considerations. But, when you look at, for example, like somebody like Elon Musk, of course, he has put a lot of his own capital in, let's say, starting, SpaceX and setting up these businesses. But, Tesla really makes a lot of money on incentives, where it's like government incentives. And without those incentives, he would have maybe never really made it. It would have never really, gotten it off the ground. And so it's, of course, we don't really see the incentives because they are somewhat like hidden. It's really difficult to get them. And there are some companies and businesses that have made a business in helping startup founders to get incentives for their business. So I think the number one thing in hindsight, and again, having had my own business before, is really, where are governments actually trying to attract talent and maybe make it a little bit easier, providing rent-free location, because it has also a lot of network effect and attracts other people. And of course, for example, we heard from Abu Dhabi as an example. They have like a $2 billion side pocket for Web3 companies. And I think as an entrepreneur, maybe you can get like some government funding where there's like less pressure from the VC of, being profitable immediately. Maybe that's like a first stepping stone for a lot of companies to think about.
Mm-mm. VC money, accessing that, I think is a very different game these days. Obviously,
Yeah.
liquidity is tight, expensive. I was just talking to some investors and trying to figure out what they're looking at these days. And there's this one guy who actually is building a product that will help a lot of VCs make it easier to do due diligence, right? So I think for sure accessing capital will be different, so that changes the landscape. But for government, for sure, I think Hong Kong themselves, they've got some incentive programs to bring, I think, money into Web3 or in that innovation space, right? So I guess so that's one area. And the one thing, I don't know if you caught this on the news, you probably have, but how Hong Kong and the UAE is going to work together and how they're going to shape this I guess the formulation or the guidelines of how this digital asset space is going to work, which I think it's going to be a great story. Not only that, where things move mainstream, but how do you think that would impact it? I mean, do you think it's just a headline that they want to create and to drive business, or how do you see these two regions working together?
So, the one thing, and it surprised, myself a little bit when I wrote this book and, put really together how the crypto industry evolved and those companies really thrived and, those players suddenly emerged. Hong Kong, of course, was like a key crypto hub at one point. And it was really because, Hong Kong turned out to be, extremely regulatory friendly from the HKMA, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, so the de facto central bank. And, shortly before, actually, China became a little bit more restrictive, versus the year before, China was like very open. And at the same time, the US, the US kind of like passed some, enforcement act, some crime enforcement act that actually made it in 2013 very costly for a lot of crypto firms to provide like onboarding and payment services. The licenses were only like 50 to like 100K, per year, maybe not that much. But it took like a year or two like of legal work, which were on top, right? So, and I think this is for a lot of like crypto startups, this is like a lot of money. And this is, I think, one example how actually regulation, forced crypto companies to move out of the US and really scale in Asia. And then suddenly, like, Hong Kong was this hotbed because the government provided, a lot of the regulatory, libertarian oversight. And as you correctly said, the Hong Kong, cyber court is quite active, providing, ecosystem there, some rent-free, kickbacks and all these things. So at the same time, the Middle East is working also very closely. And so in hindsight, while we always tend to kind of like dismiss a little bit, talk by politicians, it's just, getting votes or something. But I think we cannot dismiss it, because in history, it has actually shown that those incentives were big drivers of really like a developing ecosystem. And Hong Kong used to be actually the biggest crypto hub in the world, even it's like a small city. And so has China before, right? So it has like moved around because of the regulatory setting.
Right. Well, what have you seen recently in these other chains? I've been reading things about how China, and they're re-looking at how they're going to be managing this space. Seems like they're getting back into the game, which would imagine create a whole new opportunity for the rest of the world, based on flow, I suppose, in this space. Yeah. Do you see the same thing? Yeah.
I mean, what a lot of people really don't know is, for example, in 2013, China was airing on their national state TV CCTV channel a 30-minute documentary that Bitcoin is the new form of money. And it was really like was planting the seeds. And then a few months later, Baidu, which is the China version of Google, basically, was starting to accept Bitcoin as a payment for some of the services they're offering. And Bitcoin prices actually went up 8 times in a matter of less than 2 months. So I think all these little bread crumbles that we're hearing, from Hong Kong, China, and the really well-connected people in the crypto space, are telling you that whatever Hong Kong is doing, it comes from the blessing from China. And it's kind of being like a test bed. And if it works in Hong Kong, it will be kind of brought into the mainland and really attract a lot of capital. And I think that is something very important to kind of keep in mind, because early 2014, 90% of all the global Bitcoin trading was actually happening in China. So 90%, which is tells you how huge it became. And even like Hong Kong, has had like a market share of like 25, to like 35 to 40% at one point. So I think it's very interesting, and I wouldn't really dismiss it. And I think some of those people that are making those comments are actually people, for example, who have bought an exchange, a Hong Kong exchange, in early September, only then 2-3 weeks later to come across a Bloomberg story, Hong Kong is becoming more crypto friendly. So the timing seems to be, mysteriously well timed. And I think there's actually some examples, that I discovered over the years where, those connected people, they actually know what they're talking about. And I think it's worthwhile following their lead, because there's usually some top-down government decision that makes it easier for entrepreneurs to really, follow those footsteps, basically.
Sure. Well, there's always been obviously this narrative of the citizens in China wanting to move the money out. For if you've done research, there's many reasons why they do that. Is there a support for cryptocurrencies because it's on the blockchain and it's a little bit easier to track and audit, right? Because it's all public. Do you think there's a narrative to want everything digital so they can actually track the flows going out of China? Do you think that's something that the government wants to do?
Well, I would assume they're still trying to prevent, money outflow, because if the money leaves, the money is not really supporting the local economy. But even, China has like a very rigorous, 5-year plan, and the 2 previous 5-year plans all had like blockchain as one key pillar in their, government decisions and projections for the future. So, and we know, of course, China is trying to launch their own digital currency version, and we of course have to see, how easy it is to move money from A to B. Crypto, is to some extent, not super legal in China, but I think there's also loopholes that it's okay to hold it. It might not be okay to mine and everything, for environmental reasons and energy costs and everything. And because a lot of those companies also, get government subsidies, and the government wants to prevent this. The government wants to rather, to build the economy in other ways. But I think a new story actually this year has evolved about the dollar diversification. And I think this is where it plays a little bit in kind of, in China's hands. And, the Middle East has also made comments around this. There used to be, of course, a geopolitical kind of protection umbrella from the US. And therefore, the Middle East was transacting a lot in US dollars, but this is no longer there. So, there are some changes. And I think this is why, Hong Kong tends to work closely with the Middle East, but I think more and more China. And I think if there is this integration of, the Hong Kong crypto community with the Chinese crypto community, there might be some way to kind of also combine those crypto enterprises or those crypto hotbeds, basically.
So is it fair to say then, if you're setting up a business and you want to leverage the relationships or create expansion into opportunities in China, do you set up shop in Hong Kong, or do you go straight into China and just develop a partnership and operate within China?
No, I think you will set it up in Hong Kong. It's a very straightforward entrepreneurial place. The infrastructure is great. You have a lot of talent, right? We know Silicon Valley, did really well because there was a lot of capital available, plus a lot of talent. And this is why, so much was developed there over the last few decades. But I think you have it similarly because it's not just Hong Kong, right? Across the border and literally, 30, 40 minutes away from Hong Kong Central, is really Shenzhen. And Shenzhen is also where, a lot of the large Chinese tech companies like Tencent are located. And there has been also more and more talk, really, this, they call it the Greater Bay Area, to really merge all these, these places. They have built a bridge from Hong Kong, to Macau, so you can drive there by car, by bus, by truck, by whatever. And I think it's really like turning into like a big hub where you have capital available because there's a lot of capital. There are like 70 billionaires in Hong Kong alone, right? So it's like really like a small city place. The average rental place is of course very expensive, but the further you go from the downtown of Hong Kong, it's of course more affordable, but it's also a very low tax environment. I think this is very important for entrepreneurs, people who are starting out. It's a vibrant city, and again, as I was saying, you have this part of China that is vibrant, and I think that's going to be merged more and more over time.
Yeah. Well, talking about taxes, Dubai for sure has implemented new tax laws in which obviously you register a business there. I think it's a 9% something tax base, and if you're going to operate there, a business there in crypto, then you'll have to be facing this. Is that a good thing, bad thing? I mean, I think it's I haven't heard anything that it's a negative, and people still want to build business there. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, it's a headline number, right? It's a bit shocking, and the headline suddenly 9% from zero, right? It's a huge step. It's still very low compared globally, but then it also depends actually where your revenue comes from. I think there's also a differentiation. There are also like some ways around. Normally, growth companies, startups, they don't worry too much about the tax environment because there might not be a lot of revenue to be taxed, right? A lot of profits to be taxed. So I think the key thing is really that it's still a very, very low tax environment, and the more interesting aspect might be that the government might be helping people set up businesses, make it easy, efficient, less bureaucratic, very straightforward, because in some jurisdictions, people actually have problems when they run a crypto firm to open bank accounts. And in other jurisdictions, it's a lot friendlier. There's a lot more solutions. Switzerland has also been a place where there's a lot kind of like neobanks that are working with crypto firms. In the US, it's a little bit tougher. Of course, we have seen like Signum and Silvergate Bank or Silicon Valley Bank, being really kind of on the forefront of these things and working with crypto firms. But in other jurisdictions, it's a lot easier, and I think that's also something to keep in mind.
Yeah. Well, for sure, early days in this space, there's a lot of companies that set up shop, like in Cyprus on BVI, came in these little islands just to get approved, right, for the business. But banking has always been a problem. What do you see as a big differentiator now that you've got places like Signature Bank, Silicon Valley Bank, the ones that supported this space are now gone? So what have you heard that will change in this space?
Well, there are several other banks actually that are really stepping into this void and helping people. But of course, there's a huge backlog of onboarding. I know there's some anecdotal evidence. The people that we have also been speaking to and engaging with for our crypto-related businesses, there's just a huge demand, and this is also something that tells me that this crypto is just not going away. There are also like 420 million people involved globally that have some cryptocurrency holdings, so it's just not going to go away. And I think a lot of people and a lot of governments actually have realized this, and I think therefore certain governments seem to be a little bit restrictive, and I think it's just very tough to really build the business there, versus other governments have really said, for example, the Hong Kong government has actually told the banks to be open for crypto firms, really open for business. I mean, this is really like a straight top-down order, and I think Hong Kong has something like 8-9 neobanks that, of course, it's all kind of like virtual, all online, and I think they're also like crypto friendly. I mean, these are like all just like examples where we just have to like see the signs. We know where one jurisdiction is like less crypto friendly and others are really open for business. And I think as an entrepreneur, you have so many other things to worry about. Opening a bank account seems like the simple thing, but a lot of people actually struggle in some jurisdictions with it.
Yeah. Well, okay, if we're looking at then just in APAC, we talked about Hong Kong being a good place and Dubai being a good place and how we interact with, business within China. So then you start going in APAC's one of those areas where it's very fragmented, right? You've got crypto community that's quite strong in Indonesia, heard Thailand startup, Web3 ecosystem is starting to grow. You've got a lot of developers in Vietnam, and there's been more conferences and visibility into that space. Like, how do you, if you're going to set up shop, I know like it's decentralized these days and teams are dispersed around the world, but if you're looking to set up shop in a jurisdiction, how do you make a decision within APAC if you don't want to be in Hong Kong?
Yeah, so actually the way I started to look at, I've been to all these places, went to all these conferences, as you said, and Vietnam is really like, a big place now also for crypto and adoption. Apparently like 20% of the Vietnamese, population have crypto holdings. So it's one of these, high density countries with a lot of, crypto exposure, you can argue. But I think the way to look at it is that Singapore is sort of like a little bit like I guess like a VC play and provides capital for a lot of those places in the region, versus, for example, Vietnam is where a lot of developers are. They're building a lot of games, they're building a lot of blockchain protocols, and Vietnam is, of course, really also well situated with really a young, vibrant culture. Living costs, of course, are like relatively cheap. And really depending what kind of project you do, but it's more kind of like on the developer side. That is really, I think Vietnam is really strong and really, really hot right now, especially on games. And of course, the Philippines is where a lot of people like play those games, because we remember like Axis, Infinity, and everything that was really played there. But on the other aspect, I think, I went there because we had like some dinner with some clients there the other day. Actually, Bangkok is becoming, or Thailand itself, but especially Bangkok is becoming really a big hub, because it's a lot easier to get working visas there. The community is also, quite large and also really crypto friendly. And we're seeing this actually more and more, that people kind of like flowing to these places and running businesses out of there. Because Eastern Europe, for example, there's a lot of smart developers, but Eastern Europe has also become like relatively expensive, with the higher oil prices that we have seen a year ago. It's becoming geopolitically a little bit unsafe. So actually, I've been hearing this like over a year now, that more and more people, even from Eastern Europe, moving to, to sort of like some beach resort, they're just renting out the whole beach resort, and they're having like, 100 developers there, right? And it's a lot cheaper for them. It's a lot, better life. And I was actually very surprised because, as I was saying, we had like a dinner event there, the other day in Bangkok, and there were a lot of people there. And this is what I didn't really associate before. So actually, Thailand is also like a place where it seems to be very comfortable to really start a crypto business. So long story short, I think that actually depends what you do, what kind of business you do. But there are like various options in Asia for you.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, does Matrixport have this idea that you can work from anywhere, live on an island, take your team there and work for 3 months? I mean, these are the new models, right, of working.
Yeah, I mean, the company I work for, we have the policy that you should work in the office. There is some flexibility, but the main message is, work in the office because of synergy and everything. But then we have like different offices within the region. So there are some, ability, of course, to travel, to tap into other networks and other sort of like jurisdictions. So Matrixport itself is very well kind of like positioned in the region and engaging with basically all those countries.
Okay. Well, then let's move to the most controversial jurisdiction, and that's the U.S. Obviously, there's been a stranglehold, if that's how I like to use it, to the crypto industry, and a lot of people leaving. And it didn't surprise me. It's exactly what the U.S. would do, protecting the citizens, and they're trying to set precedents now. That's what the law does, and they're going to go after people, right? That's how they set precedents, right? They go through the legal process, and whatever comes out of the decision will set a lot of the new rules, right? But do you see a lot of people really wanting to leave and set up shop? I mean, I know that's a narrative. People have been doing that, but there's still opportunities in the U.S. I can only imagine. But you just have to work under a different framework.
Again, I think it really depends what kind of business you are engaging with, right? And what kind of services you're offering. I think, the regulator, and of course there is a debate between the SEC and the CFTC, what is the security and everything. But it really depends, what kind of business you're trying to engage in. And I think we're seeing this, for example, that especially on the crypto spot market, so basically the trading Bitcoin tokens versus the derivatives, the purple futures or offering options and everything, this is being done more and more outside of the US. So actually I was like this talking last night with the Winklevoss brothers, coincidentally. I mean, they're actually moving, a lot of their stuff also outside of the US, they're moving it, to the Middle East. They're having some really good discussions actually about this in London with the Bank of England. And then, of course, they're looking more and more into Singapore, really for the derivatives business where they can really set this up. So it might be that the US is okay to offer some certain like spot kind of crypto businesses versus the derivatives exchange business that's all done outside of the US. And I think outside of the US, the market is already bigger. And I think this is just like a sign how kind of the world is like changing a little bit, where, those people, they just don't want to wait. I mean, crypto has actually moved like so fast, like a lot of the things, we take for granted now from stable coin to perps and everything. Stable coins weren't really that used kind of like 3-4 years ago. It really just started, at a certain point, but before it was really like nothing. And we're using this as like, everyday thing suddenly. So crypto moves very fast, and those people just don't want to wait. And I think if you sit in the US and yes, you have probably like good access to capital, good taxes, it's a huge market, but crypto is global anyways, right? It's not that you need to be in the Denver or Dallas or wherever, Miami region. You're not building a crypto business, just for Florida, right? You're building it for the world. And that's why I think it's probably depending where you are and again, how you set up the business. But I see this more and more that, we have also heard this from Coinbase. They're looking into the Bahamas, or also more Singapore, Middle East. I mean, these are like always like the same jurisdictions that are being like thrown around now. And more and more people actually saying they're increasing the hiring in those places. And I think you just have to go with the trend, right? And the trend is really for those places to strive a little bit. And, why not explore something new?
Right. Well, that's a good point. I think when we're talking about different jurisdictions and where to set up shop, but the reality is this space is global, right? In which when it comes to building teams, building partnerships, building communities, building products to deliver to different markets, it really doesn't matter, I guess, to that in that respect, which is actually quite exciting, right? Because you're not limited to just operate in one location. You can, look at what Binance has been doing. They've been acquiring so many different entities with licenses so they can enter markets very fast, and they've been doing that, and it's great, right? Because at least they're trying to work within the constraints of every single jurisdiction, but they're trying to grab a global market. So I've always liked that approach. Well, going out to then Europe, then let's talk about that. Switzerland always, big talk, big supporter, small market. London, I've been hearing a lot of noise about that. What's your take on places to set up shop in Europe?
Yeah, actually, I think London might be a secret winner of all this little hassle that we have in the US, because London is, of course, also a huge financial hub. And, it has a lot of pools of capital that maybe are not sitting, in the UK itself, but maybe they're flowing through London. And I think that's also like very key. And for example, one thing we have also been hearing is one of the largest clearer. So in traditional finance, you need to clear trade. So there is, off the exchange, basically an entity. In crypto, everything is like within one company. And this is why we had all these problems with FTX and so on. So one of the largest clearers is a company called an entity called LCH. And apparently they are also working on a big crypto project so that they can be a clearer for some exchanges. And I think that's going to be a little bit a game changer, because suddenly you will have institutions that might be able to trade on those exchanges. You can clear, so you can make sure that your trade gets, settles basically and everything. So I think there is actually a lot of stuff happening. The Prime Minister in the UK is very young. He has been seen as very crypto. And a lot of stuff is happening there as well. And I think, when you look what's really is making noise, we heard a lot of, about stable coins also from the UK. And I think after Brexit, the UK is also trying to find a little bit its edge, again, right? And, because some banks have moved then from the UK after Brexit, to Amsterdam or Paris or Frankfurt. And I think the UK is just looking for a new driver, and they have actually their eyes also on crypto. And of course, London itself is a big hub in Europe. It's English speaking. It's straightforward. There's a lot of universities, a lot of science-focused universities. So you have a lot of good university talent. I mean, these are like all these things to look out for. It's almost like the Silicon Valley model being replicated, a little bit with Hong Kong, the Greater Bay Area, and Shenzhen. Network, capital, and, a lot of smart university graduates. We have this sort of like in London as well. And I think by those jurisdictions actually, are positioning themselves as really well.
Okay. Well, based on everything that happened with FTX, and now for sure, many different jurisdictions have the focus to then support the space and trying to figure out how they're going to manage it. How do you think in general, are jurisdictions really focused on investor protection as their main driver? Or are they looking more for creating a secure environment more for flows in and out of the country from a AML level, perspective? What do you think? What is their focus? Is it the investors or more of protecting it from a higher level?
Well, I think, protecting the investors is always, I think what regulators are saying. There was some confusion, for example, in Singapore, because you had, you had sort of like the regulator telling Binance to leave out of Singapore versus some, link to the government or link to the state. Venture capital firms have been investors in FTX. In the equity, and a lot of people saw this is like an endorsement from the government for FTX, and that's why I think like 5 or 6% of all the deposits in FTX were actually from Singapore-based citizens. So it's a little bit what is really the government is really trying to do. I think the government is really trying, yes, to protect investors. Trying to provide jobs and secure a living environment. And I think a lot of regulators just need to understand the space a little bit better. I was saying earlier, there's around 420 million cryptocurrency holders in the world, and some have trading like a little bit or have it, or some more active. So I think the space is just not going away, and I think education has always been voiced as the number one thing, because for a lot of people it seems like random. They don't know why prices go up and down. They don't know really what's the story. They're hearing some like random memes and everything. So but this is what I always because on some of these personal functions or whatever, people always want to talk about crypto. You're going to a parent teacher meeting almost, and the teacher hears that you are from from the crypto space, they have always like questions no matter what people do. So I think there's a lot of questions, and I think that's was also like one reason to write the book, but it's really to answer a lot of the questions and help educate people. So I think the regulator just needs to, I think, because there's so much demand from people, I think the regulator needs to be more up to speed with certain things and provide the level playing field, because I think people actually want this, right? And they want to engage in a safe environment. And I think the best example is probably Japan, where Japan has actually passed a number of laws, kind of 2016 and 17, and made it, for example, mandatory that exchanges actually need to have certain audits, they need to have the capital there, and they need to also use more cold storage, because a lot of the especially the Korean exchanges over the years were hacked by, of course, North Korean, state hackers, because actually they used escrow accounts, they used the hot wallets a lot, and of course those wallets were hacked. Versus in Japan, they put another regulation in place. And the interesting aspect, actually, FTX Japan, people might have not lost any money there because the money was actually there because there has been some clear guidelines from the regulator. And I think that's kind of like a blueprint that we should implement for all jurisdictions, right? I mean, if exchange ABC, give you an audit or give an audit to the government, every kind of like 3 months or something, or every 6 months, maybe then things are differently and things maybe are safer than they were. So I think it's really those implementations that we have seen in Japan from the government. If they would be rolled out in other jurisdictions, I think this would be like key beneficiary.
Right. Well, I caught news recently about how the Malaysia securities regulator had asked Huobi Global to kind of stop operating because they don't have prior registration to operate a crypto exchange. Because I think it was funny because I remember seeing the first announcement that Huobi is going to enter Malaysia, and you're talking about I guess it was more than over a year ago, and now they're saying, oh, don't operate here. You don't have prior registration. So I mean, just to the point of sometimes it takes the regulators some time to catch up. I'm sure every single jurisdiction has its own set of problems that they need to prioritize. So if crypto isn't really a huge impact to their economy or to their people, then there's no real pressure to actually focus on it. And now, there definitely is. So I see. We didn't even talk about Korea or Japan, and those operate a little bit independently, and they have been, evolving for sure. I think when I got into the industry, I was an ICO advisor, traveling to both of those countries because it was so a hotbed for raising money for tokens at that time. Quite interesting. It's changed quite a bit. Okay, so let's go back to anything else to mention on the Europe side, or in that western side of the world. You mentioned London, Switzerland has been big. I mean, Paris is also trying to be a big hotbed for Web3 blockchain development. What do you know about Paris?
Well, there's been also some, stories how, for example, Binance has, received certain licenses. They're building a hub also there. So I think we're just seeing this more and more. And I think it's really a space where people want to engage with. Of course, some people have like some language problem, if they suddenly set up shop in Paris, for example. So I think it's really like a matter, where life is convenient, where it's helpful from the government in terms of incentives. Again, I think, as something that, as you said earlier, now some VC firms that are a little bit constrained to give out more capital. Maybe then we need to look closer into government incentives, to get the funding, right? I mean, if you set up your Web3 business in Abu Dhabi and the government, provides you, I don't know, like $2 million in funding for the next kind of like 3 years, maybe it's worthwhile to just give it a shot, right? And because, if those government handouts come, they also come with a less bureaucratic oversight that is maybe, opening a lot of doors for you, right? So there will always be like, network effects. There will always be, little group incentives to really like expand and bring in more people and talented people. So I think, I wouldn't really, I would kind of like try a little bit kind of like the Elon Musk strategy as I kind of like start to look at it, right? Where you just look at a lot of those incentives because they come also with a very different price tag, right? Maybe you give up less equity, or maybe there will be some other things, because governments are not necessarily, profit maximizer. They're more kind of maximizers of bringing in talent, providing a great, environment for people to live in, and really just kind of upgrading, their kind of their footprint. And I think this is especially what the Middle East has been voicing, with the view that maybe oil, doesn't really matter in 20 years. We need to upgrade the economies. And I think, why wouldn't you be part of something like this, where there's a strong incentive and attraction?
Okay. Well, coming out of the last crypto winter, 2018, around that time frame, I really thought that security tokens would be the next thing. And what ended up happening, they were NFTs, lots of unregulated products. It kind of reminded me like a continuation of the ICO days. What do you see going into the future? What are the assets that people will then be focusing on investing in? I mean, beyond altcoins, there's like these meme coins that's still like, no, they're temporary to me. So what do you see as moving in this market? What's going to mature as an asset that people really want?
Yeah. So the way I look at it is, it's still quite costly to engage and transact with most blockchains that are really decentralized. For example, Ethereum is still sometimes quite costly, and if cost is the main driver for, let's say, innovation, I think then we can actually look back in history, and for example, like 10 years ago, it would have been actually impossible to report a podcast or to stream a movie from Netflix. And 10 years ago, yes, Netflix was becoming like really hot, but kind of like 15 years ago, it wasn't really like anywhere. And I think what has happened during this kind of the last 10, 12 years, that the streaming costs actually have come down a lot. So suddenly you could stream. I remember like when you still were downloading like a video and it took like 5 minutes, it took like longer to download the video than to watch it and everything, right? And these days are like long gone, right? I mean, now we can download like a whole movie within like a minute or whatever it takes, right? So I would make the argument that if the cost to transact with a blockchain go lower and lower, and there is probably going to be another Ethereum upgrade coming later this year, then you might see actually a lot of new business models really like thriving. And because we know $60 billion has gone into crypto from VC investors over the last kind of like around 2 years. So somebody will develop something really powerful and really strong. I think we just have to really assume and believe this. And I think it's very similar. I look at it, if you would have bought like Apple shares 20 years ago, you would have had no idea about the iPhone. It came only out 2007, and then suddenly all these apps. I remember I was reading, mobile is going to be the future, and then suddenly Mark Zuckerberg changed, the company only focus on mobile, forget the rest and everything. And it was just it seems just a few years ago, but it was a monumental shift. And I think we can also see this very quickly, with crypto, right? There are some building blocks that need to be improved. And I think the Ethereum needs to work a little bit faster. If you want to hear some criticism, I think people are like waiting. But I think if transaction costs really come in a lot lower, then there will be probably a lot more business models really built on top of it. And, we can only imagine the impact of that then. Because in the end, I think crypto is just another extension of technology, and technology is just cutting out the middleman and making things cheaper and more efficient and more reliable. And, there's, of course, the middle and the back office space for large, institutions, insurance companies, banks, that crypto might be taking out in the future, where you have instant settlement. I mean, they're just like endless things. There's also, of course, identification on the blockchain. I feel like, with this kind of COVID crisis and the vaccination certificates, if they would have put those certificates as a form of NFT on the blockchain, where you just kind of like just give your 24-digit code to kind of an immigration officer and he can like check it. I mean, that would have made like a big difference for the global adoption of NFTs suddenly. And I think that is something that we might still have in the future, where your ID card, I mean, luckily it didn't happen to me, but some people lose their passports, and then you need to go to the embassy. There needs to be some back and forth to prove that you are this person. I mean, unless like a 24-digit code or something, and you can give it, and it's all there. And I think that's something that will be coming. It's just a little bit slow. Maybe it's a cost issue.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm really looking forward to the point when they have sovereign identity, and it makes it so much easier. I always like the idea that when you're trying to provide security, they don't ask you so many things about you that they really don't need to know. What I mean? It's just too much information getting ported out. They're asking you over the phone. You're in public, and anyone can pick up this information. But I totally agree. Technology itself, I've seen many promises of L1s coming out saying that they're going to be like the fastest out there, and it's going to change everything. We've yet to see, but we all know that it takes time. It's no different than internet, as you mentioned, like how long it took for speeds to get to the point where streaming is so effective now and so cheap. Talking about then, TradFi market and where it's moving in this space and technology for sure. What people I think really don't recognize is all the intermediaries that need to be in place in order to transact the trades. And this is why there's the T-2 days to complete a whole trade. Imagine if, so your thoughts, do you believe that if technology became, highly, effective on a cost basis, do you believe when the capital markets is just one market and it's 24/7, like it never stops? Do you ever think it'll get to the point like crypto, the TradFi market actually turning that way? Do you think it'll turn this way as well?
I mean, I don't think so. I think there has been, a lot of stories over the years. And I mean, you have already like some pre-market trading, post-market trading. I mean, the market, is executable already like before. And even, let's say, futures, US equity futures or other futures, they tend to really trade almost like, I think even like 23 hours a day. I mean, there's really just like a small break. I think even like actually only like a 15-minute break or something. I mean, do you really need like trading 24 hours? Does it make sense? Maybe, but also sometimes you just want to be done with it and move on. So I think it might happen, and yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, I'm just going to that point because there are a lot of technologies going out there where a lot of the trades happen algorithmically or just some program that just manages it, and it's not like the trader needs to be so active. And I'm seeing this as trying to find opportunities through a 24-hour period to gain some yield, whatever. If you're like that active a trader, high frequency, yeah. So with that said, do you think government, so G20, 3 months ago came together, all looking at the space, how they're going to look at working together? Do you see countries aligning across the globe, and how maybe let's say everyone's got their own CDBC, or do you think there will be support to kind of merge into, I guess, global stable coins? How do you see it? Or do you think it's more like, okay, our USD is going to have a US, DC, then the won has its own stable coin? Or do you think it'll start turning out like this? Like everyone still wants their national currency?
No, I think everybody still wants their national currency and really keep track of those flows, influence flows directly. I mean, one argument how they're kind of trying to sell, of course, this government digital currencies now is, of course, we can give you programmable money where we provide you some stimulus through the COVID support period, where you need to spend these digital dollars by I don't know, December 2023, and then afterwards they're canceled. So that's kind of like, I think what they're trying to do. And I think for those rules, money with rules, basically, I think the government need to control of their country, their own currency. And I think you will probably have, some leading currencies, of course, just like you have in the biggest, in the TradFi space. So I don't think there's going to be much difference. It's just very, very similar.
Okay. Well, Look, Marcus, I think we've chewed up a lot of time today, and we've had really good conversations. And think this is a moving target, right? I'll probably talk to you I could do another interview in 3 months, 6 months,
Yeah.
and so much more would have changed.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's call this a wrap. I want to thank you for your time for joining the Startup Voyage podcast. And yeah, any last things you want to say about your book? Maybe I mean, are you going to come out with a second book next year? You got any ideas, ambitions for that?
Yeah, I could, I really enjoyed it because I just uncovered like so many interesting facts and factors. The industry evolved and drove and developed, and again, discovered about all these jurisdictions, how key it is really a level playing field. I mean, there are some more ideas about more books. I kind of like enjoyed it, and it just, I just learned so much from the book itself, because it's I use something like 631 references, so it's heavily researched and everything, and it's really condensed in like one place. But I think there's some other ideas, I think other ideas that I want to explore. I don't know if I have the time right now, but maybe like next year. So I think it's a good side project, right? Because I mean, I write a lot, I publish a lot on, let's say, on LinkedIn or other venues, but you publish and it sort of gets forgotten a little bit over time. And of course, sometimes you can refer, to some regulatory piece or whatever you published a while ago. But I think a book, it's there, people can like look at it. It's it's a hard piece, and so I think because the world also keeps evolving and developing, right? I mean, who knows what's going to happen? I think there's just a lot of stuff happening on the tech side. But I think if you take really the time to research some of those things, you just understand it a lot better. And I think that's why I wanted to go. And I think maybe that's an idea for like a next book, to find something that, where people don't really understand why it's like so big and what has happened there. So there are some ideas.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to read a book about how VCs run their operations and how they make decisions and where to invest in. And FOMO, right? FOMO that happens. Like, I feel like that's what's happening right now, right? You've got AI, huge market. You can see both streams of, okay, it's not going to be as impactful than people think. Then you've got the other side where you just put it on the headlines and on that ticker and it's going to sell. And what I heard from VCs is basically the fastest exit they have seen in history for some of these companies. It's just amazing. So that might be another topic to look into. I thought I'd be curious. All right. Well, thanks for your time, Marcus. We'll talk next time. Good luck with your book sales. And I'll be talking about and promoting it. I still need to read through it myself, but thank you for your time.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Hey, that wraps it up for another episode of the Startup Voyage podcast. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with your friends and your colleagues in the Web3 space, or anyone who could find value in it. Thank you for your time listening today. And hey, let's continue the conversation. You can reach out to us on social media. Look up the Startup Voyage, and that would be the handle. Go on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. We look forward to continuing the discussion, hearing your feedback, and come up with new topics for our future podcast episodes. Thank you for joining, and have a great day.